So it's but it's definitely a different flavor. If I couldn't have gluten, I don't know that gluten-free beer would be the way to go for me or not. I don't know what I would do if I couldn't have gluten. I would not be in a good place.
As we move into the summer months here in Durango, the Animas River is not the only thing that starts to flow heavily. The consumption of beer, that most refreshing of all summer adult beverages, becomes ubiquitous during the hot months. With 5 hometown breweries to choose from in a town of 20,000, Durangoans could be considered experts on the topic. Although it is not the world's oldest fermented alcoholic drink, beer predated grape wine by several centuries and distilled liquors by several millennia. Our oldest hard evidence of beer production comes from Godin Tepe in what is now Iran. Ancient pottery recovered from the site shows beer stone scaling, proving that at least 7,000 years ago, people were enjoying a healthy brew. Beer fueled trade and ceremony in Europe and around the world, but it was a fairly localized, artisanal product until the Industrial Revolution brought tools like hydrometers and thermometers into the mix, allowing for true mass production. Pilsner lager, in particular, very light beers that spoiled less easily in times of no refrigeration, grew to become America's standard style. In 1978, President Jimmy Carter signed a law legalizing the home production of beer and wine. This one act allowed an amazing resurgence of brewing culture in the United States, with the number of breweries expanding from 42 in 1978 to 2,750 in 2012. One of those breweries is Durango's largest, Ska Brewing. Founded in 1995 by Bill Graham and Dave Thibodeau, the company added Matt Vincent as head of operations in 1996 and never looked back. Moving into its 24,000 square foot world headquarters in 2008, the company now boasts annual sales of over $8 million and brewed over 25,000 barrels of beer in 2012. Ska Brewing's commitment to the Durango community is outstanding, with thousands of gallons of beer donated every year to worthy causes, including Fort Lewis College fundraisers for scholarships. Dave Thibodeau generously offered to take us on a tour of the Ska World headquarters and teach us a little bit about the different types of brew on this episode of Fortifact. Beer.
So this is what we do is this stuff right now has been malted, which means the barley was partially germinated and then it was roasted at a certain amount of time at a certain temperature to achieve the caramel characteristics. What we do is put it in the in our mill and we crack this husk on it and it exposes that starchy enzyme in the middle, and then that's what we mash, and that starchy enzyme is what gets converted into a sugar that can ferment. This is wheat. We use a lot of wheat. We use a small amount of wheat in a lot of our beers, but wheat provides a creamy flavor and it helps with head retention in beers and kind of gives a fuller, creamier mouthfeel. But the whole process starts with our brew house, which is right over here. It's kind of hard to see, we're a little packed in, but there's a kettle on the back side, and then this thing under the red hopper is called our mash tun. So we fill that up with 2-row barley, and depending on the style of the beer and the type of barley we use, we put together our recipe and then we mill it and weigh it out, and then we put it in this mash tun, and we add a certain amount of water, and we basically steep it or mash it for a certain amount of time to break down all the starches that are in malted barley, and chemically break them down to fermentable sugars. And then after we've created all that sugar, there's a screen on the bottom of that tank, and we run water through it and extract all that sugary water out of that bed of spent grain now, and we fill our kettle, and our kettle is where we boil it and add our hops. So, and then after that, we cool it down. This thing's called a heat exchanger, And it's got really cold water or glycol coolant on the other, running opposite the beer as it goes through and cooling the beer down. And then once that beer's cool enough, we put it in the tanks, into the fermenters. And that's where we add our yeast and the fermentation takes place. You can see here's a heavily fermenting tank of beer. So that's just an airlock right there. So that's just CO2 bubbling out as yeast is eating the sugar inside the tank. Wow. Once it finishes, then that's when it moves into conditioning, and eventually we'll carbonate it, recarbonate it, and package it. So a couple of our beers on tap. Let me, I'll go from light to dark, but I'll start with our one lager that we do, which is the Mexican lager. That's pretty light and clear. And I'll pour some of our blonde ale, our true blonde, to give you a little perspective. So it's close to the same color. The blonde might even be a little lighter in color, but it's slightly higher in alcohol, and it's got quite a bit more. There's a fruity characteristic almost. I'll pour some of our Pinstripe, which is a medium-bodied beer that's reddish in color, which is brewed with the caramel malts. So the color can always fool people. A darker colored beer is not necessarily a heavier beer or a higher beer in alcohol. Often, but not always. This is a specialty stout. It's actually made with cocoa and vanilla beans and spearmint and peppermint. It's a vernal mint stout, and it kind of tastes like a Girl Scout cookie. The adult version, the liquid adult version of a Girl Scout cookie. Modus operandi, which will probably fit right about in here on the color spectrum. Yeah, so this is a very, very hoppy beer, and it has more alcohol than any of these, including the stout. This is about 6.8% alcohol by volume, and this is 5.8% alcohol by volume. Yeah, you know, we're fortunate to live in Durango. It's something we try to do our best not to take for granted, that we can actually make a living and live in a place as beautiful as this, and then brew beer on top of it, something we're really passionate about and really enjoy doing. And that, we owe a debt. There's a debt of gratitude there, and if it weren't for the community of Durango and the people supporting us, we wouldn't be so fortunate to have this lifestyle. And so we try and do a lot to give back. If somebody's in need, we try to be there, and people have always been there for us. So I think it's our responsibility to do that, to strengthen our community and to help keep it healthy. I couldn't be a happier person because of this community and this beer.
We can continue to enjoy gracious living with the help of fine beer and ale. Gracious living, self-government, freedom, tied to the way of doing things that have made the American economy what it is today and have helped make America great. That's the way we, as Americans, like it.